What happens when the woman you loved betrays you, not just emotionally but financially? In a world where trust is everything, Sam's life shatters as he uncovers his wife's darkest secrets. Affairs, fraud, and deceit all come crashing down, but Sam isn't backing down. Will he get justice, or will his world be destroyed forever? Watch as the ultimate revenge unfolds. Can Sam rise from the ashes, or is it too late? Don't miss the explosive final showdown. You won't believe the truth that's about to be revealed. Where do you stand in this twisted game? Watch now to find out. Sam Bennett couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his wife, Lena, truly smile. They sat across from each other at a cozy, well-lit table in the restaurant they frequented on special occasions, their anniversary dinner. The air was thick with the scent of expensive wine and candlelight, yet it felt like something was missing. The usual warmth between them had evaporated. Lena wasn't engaged in the conversation, barely even glancing at Sam as she scrolled through her phone, her lips forming only the faintest of smiles when she looked up. "Is everything okay?" Sam asked, trying to mask his concern. He'd planned this dinner for weeks. He'd picked the restaurant, the wine, everything. But no matter what he did, it didn't seem to reach her. Lena's smile flickered before fading completely. She set her phone down, a little too quickly. "Sorry, just work stuff," she said. Her voice was soft but distant, almost like she wasn't really there. Sam nodded, trying to ignore the ache in his chest. He knew Lena had been working late more often lately, but this felt different. This felt like something was wrong, like she was no longer here with him, mentally or emotionally. It wasn't that he didn't understand the pressures of her job. Lena had always been driven, passionate about her career in marketing, always pushing to climb higher. But Sam had always been her anchor, or so he thought, her confidant, her partner. Lately, however, it felt like the distance between them was widening with every passing day. "Are you sure you're okay?" Sam asked again, trying to catch her gaze, his tone laced with worry. Lena looked at him then, but it wasn't the look he was used to. It was vacant. Her eyes lacked the warmth they once held, the spark that had first drawn him to her. She reached for her glass of wine, taking a long sip before responding. "I'm fine. I just have a lot on my plate," she said. Her tone was dismissive, as though the conversation didn't matter, as though he didn't matter. Sam's hand instinctively clenched around his fork. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, and he found himself fighting the urge to shout, to demand answers. What was going on with her? He couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away, something he couldn't control. Suddenly the moment felt heavy, suffocating. Sam had tried to ignore it, to keep up the facade of a perfect marriage. But it wasn't working anymore. Lena was slipping away, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't reach her. Lena's phone buzzed again, her eyes immediately darting to it, and Sam's heart sank. She glanced at the screen, her fingers swiping quickly across the glass before she put the phone face down, almost as if she was hiding it from him. "What is it?" Sam asked, his voice colder now, tinged with frustration. "It's nothing," Lena replied, her eyes not meeting his. The conversation drifted into an uncomfortable silence, and Sam's mind began to race. It had been happening for weeks now. The emotional distance, the lack of affection, the secretive behavior. He had seen the signs before, brushed them aside, convincing himself that it was just stress from work, or perhaps his own fault for not being there enough. But tonight, something in him snapped. He wasn't blind anymore. Lena wasn't just distracted, she was withdrawing. Sam leaned back in his chair, his thoughts swirling as the dim light flickered around him. He could feel it, the growing chasm between them, and it terrified him. For the first time in their marriage, Sam wasn't sure if they could fix it. He wasn't sure if they even wanted to. The waiter brought their entrees, but the food felt like an afterthought. Sam picked at his meal, his appetite lost. He couldn't stop thinking about what was happening, about the distance that seemed to widen with each word Lena didn't say, with each glance she averted from him. Lena reached for her phone again, her fingers moving as though she was texting someone. Sam's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. He knew it now. "Lena," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at him, but there was no recognition in her gaze. It was as though they were strangers sitting at opposite ends of a table, separated by something neither could see but both could feel. "Are you seeing someone else?" Sam asked. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Lena froze, her fingers still on the screen of her phone, but her eyes were no longer evasive. She looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time that night. The silence that followed was unbearable. The days following the anniversary dinner were a blur for Sam. His mind was consumed by one question. What had happened to their marriage? Lena's coldness had settled like a heavy fog, and the more Sam tried to reach her, the more distant she became. She was always busy with work, always too tired to talk, and when they were together, the conversations felt forced, like they were strangers living in the same house. At first, Sam thought it was just the stress of their busy careers. He had noticed Lena working longer hours, coming home late, sometimes not even bothering to greet him. He convinced himself that it was temporary, that they'd get through it. After all, they'd been through tougher times before, hadn't they? But then, the cracks in their relationship began to show in more subtle ways. Sam caught Lena slipping her phone into her bag whenever he entered the room. She'd scroll through it, often texting someone quickly and then putting it down, avoiding his gaze. The sense of unease grew with each passing day. Sam's suspicions couldn't be ignored anymore. One evening, Sam came home from work early, hoping to surprise Lena with dinner. He walked into the kitchen and found her sitting at the table, her phone in hand, a faint smile on her face. But it wasn't the smile she used to give him. It was a forced, practiced smile, the kind she put on for strangers. Sam stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment before speaking. "Who are you texting?" Lena looked up, startled as if she hadn't heard him approach. "It's nothing," she said, quickly pocketing her phone. "Just work stuff." Sam felt a knot tighten in his chest. The excuse was the same as always, but something in her eyes, something cold and distant, told him that the truth wasn't as simple as she made it seem. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "You've been distant lately," Sam said, walking over to the table. "I don't know what's going on, but I need to know if there's something we need to talk about." Lena sighed, placing her hand on her forehead. "It's not that simple, Sam," she said, her voice tired. "I'm just overwhelmed. Work has been a lot lately, and I don't know, I just need some space." Sam's heart sank. Space. The word hung in the air, almost like a signal. She wasn't just overwhelmed by work, there was something else. He could feel it. "I get it," Sam said, sitting down across from her, "but this isn't like you. You've been distant for weeks now. Something's going on, Lena." Lena shifted in her seat, her eyes darting to the side, avoiding his gaze. "Sam, please," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "Can we just drop it? I'm not cheating on you if that's what you're thinking. I'm just tired, okay?" The words hit Sam like a punch to the gut. He wanted to believe her. He had to believe her. But everything in his gut screamed that something wasn't right. "Are you sure?" Sam asked, his voice trembling. "Because I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it feels like you're pulling away from me." Lena's face softened for a moment, and she reached across the table to take his hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know how to fix this." Sam looked at her, searching her face for any sign of truth. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that this was just a phase, but the nagging feeling in his chest wouldn't go away. Later that night, as Sam lay in bed, the silence between them was deafening. Lena had rolled over to her side, her back turned to him. He reached out, his hand brushing hers, but she didn't move. The room felt colder than usual. Sam stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. Is she lying to me? He couldn't ignore the growing suspicion anymore. The small signs, the strange behavior, it all pointed to something he wasn't ready to face. But what? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Lena's phone buzzing from the other side of the room. She had left it on the nightstand, and Sam's eyes flicked to it involuntarily. The screen was lit up with a message notification. Without thinking, Sam got out of bed and walked over to the phone. The name on the screen made his blood run cold. It was Marcus. Sam froze. His heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the screen, trying to breathe through the panic that surged through him. The notification wasn't just any message. It was a text from Marcus that read, "I can't wait to see you tonight. We'll make this work. Just trust me." Sam's hand shook as he placed the phone back on the nightstand. He turned to look at Lena, who was still lying motionless in bed. Her breathing was shallow, and Sam couldn't tell if she was awake or pretending to sleep. His mind raced, his pulse quickening. This was it, the confirmation he'd been dreading. There was no denying it anymore. Lena was having an affair. Sam sat in his office the next morning, staring at the screen of his laptop. His mind wasn't on the project he was supposed to be working on, nor the clients he had meetings with. It was on Lena, on Marcus, and on the undeniable fact that his wife had been lying to him for months. The text message from Marcus echoed in his mind like a drumbeat he couldn't escape. "I can't wait to see you tonight. We'll make this work. Just trust me." His stomach turned as he replayed the scene from last night, the moment he had picked up Lena's phone and seen Marcus's name. The feeling of betrayal sank deep into his chest, a weight that seemed to suffocate him. He tried to focus, tried to tell himself that he should confront Lena now. But the thought of facing her, of hearing her excuses, made his skin crawl. He wasn't sure he was ready for that, but he knew he couldn't let it go on. After hours of pacing, he decided to take action. He needed to know the truth. He couldn't live like this, not anymore. Sam hired a private investigator. He knew it was risky, but he had to find out what was really happening. If there was any shred of hope left for their marriage, he needed to see it for himself. A few days later, Sam received the report. His heart raced as he flipped through the pages, each line confirming what he feared. Lena wasn't just texting Marcus. She was meeting him, more than once. The investigator had tracked them to a hotel, where they had spent an entire afternoon together. The images were clear. Lena, her arm wrapped around Marcus, her lips pressed against his. Sam's throat went dry. He could barely breathe as he stared at the photographs. The woman he had loved, the woman he thought he knew, was lying to him. She was betraying him in the worst way possible. The anger boiled inside him, but it wasn't just anger. It was grief, heartbreak, the realization that the life they had built together was a lie. He sat down heavily on the couch, his mind racing. How had he missed this? How had he been so blind? The signs had been there all along, the late nights, the secretive behavior, the coldness. But he had ignored it. He had convinced himself that work was the only thing on her mind, that she was just going through a phase. The tears came not in sobs but in quiet streams as he thought of everything he had lost. The trust, the love, the future they had planned together. Sam had built his life around Lena. He had given her everything, and now it felt like all of it had been taken away in an instant. The following night, Sam sat at the dinner table waiting for Lena to come home. He had made dinner just like old times, but nothing felt the same. He wasn't sure what he was going to say. He didn't even know if he could look at her without feeling disgusted. When Lena walked in, she looked tired but smiled as she placed her purse on the table. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, walking over to kiss him on the cheek. The kiss felt like an act, a performance she was putting on, and it sent a shiver down Sam's spine. "Lena, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. She froze for a moment, her hand still lingering in the air where she had planned to touch his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly but not enough to show concern. "I know about you and Marcus," Sam said. The words hung in the air, the truth finally coming out. "I know what's been going on. I've seen the pictures." Lena's face went pale, and for a moment she didn't speak. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for a way out, a way to make it all disappear. "Sam, I didn't mean for it to happen. It's just, everything's been so hard lately. You've been so distant, and I felt like I was invisible to you," she said, her voice trembling. Sam's hands clenched into fists. "Don't," he said, his voice low but filled with an undeniable hurt. "Don't make excuses for what you've done. You've been lying to me, Lena. You've been sneaking around behind my back. You've been with him. You've betrayed me." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Sam. I never wanted to hurt you. But you were never there for me. You were always too busy with your work, and I felt so alone. Marcus gave me the attention I needed, the love I thought I lost." Sam shook his head, the weight of her words cutting through him. "That's your excuse? You couldn't talk to me? You couldn't tell me you were feeling neglected? You just had to go behind my back and destroy everything we've built?" Lena's shoulders trembled as she struggled to speak, but Sam was done. He had heard enough. "I don't know if I can look at you the same way again," he said quietly. "You've shattered everything, Lena. You've shattered me." Sam couldn't escape the suffocating realization of what Lena had done. Betrayal, heartache. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. The discovery of the affair had been the first punch, but the second blow, the one that truly shook him, was what he uncovered about their finances. He had been trying to focus on work, trying to keep some semblance of normalcy, but his mind kept drifting back to the financial report he had received the previous day from his lawyer. The numbers didn't add up. Lena had drained their savings. Money had been siphoned into several hidden accounts. Sam had been too focused on their relationship problems to notice the financial manipulations. It was only now, after the affair had been exposed, that the full scope of her deception became clear. His hand shook as he scrolled through the documents on his laptop, his eyes growing wide as he connected the dots. Lena had not only been unfaithful, but she had also been setting the stage to take everything from him. Money had been moved from their joint account into a private one under her name, and it didn't stop there. Lena had also invested in high-risk ventures with Marcus, using Sam's name, his credit. The disgust that washed over Sam was immediate and overwhelming. He couldn't breathe. His stomach turned as he looked at the bank statements. Lena had taken thousands, maybe more, and it wasn't just the money, it was the trust. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He should have seen the signs. It was there all along. The late nights when she'd come home smelling of expensive perfume, the moments when she'd been distant, secretive. And now this, the whole picture. It was all a manipulation. A game. He grabbed his phone and called his lawyer, his hands still trembling. "I need you to look at something. It's worse than I thought," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Moments later, his lawyer, Brian, called back. "Sam, I've gone through the documents. This isn't just about the affair, it's criminal. Lena's been making transactions, setting up hidden accounts. She's been using your name for investments that aren't even yours. This could ruin you financially." Sam's heart sank even further. "She's been planning this for a while, hasn't she?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Yes, and it's not just about her trying to take your money. There's a bigger picture here. She and Marcus may have been involved in a scheme to steal your assets. We need to act fast to protect everything." The weight of those words hit Sam like a freight train. He had trusted Lena. He had given her everything, and she had used him. But he couldn't let this go. He couldn't let her destroy him in every way. The next few days were a blur of meetings with his lawyer, tracking Lena's transactions, and going through every document she had manipulated. Sam couldn't believe the level of betrayal. How had he missed this? He thought back to all the times Lena had complained about their finances, about how they never had enough, how Sam was never doing enough. All the while she had been draining their accounts and feeding her desires with Marcus. It felt like she had been playing him for a fool. At night, when he was alone with his thoughts, he couldn't help but feel like a failure. How had he not seen it? How had he let her convince him that everything was okay? The guilt gnawed at him, but a new sense of clarity was taking shape. He wasn't going to let her win. The anger was now replaced with a cold determination. Sam started to gather his resources. He made a plan. He wasn't going to let Lena get away with this. Not financially and not emotionally. He had to act fast. If he didn't, she would walk away with everything. He stood up and walked to his desk, taking a deep breath. He looked at the photograph of him and Lena on their wedding day. That smile, that love, gone, replaced by lies, deceit, and betrayal. It was all too much, but he couldn't let her get away with it. Sam had to fight. Not just for his money, but for the life he had built. He wasn't going to let Lena take it all without a fight. Sam sat on the edge of the bed, his hands gripping the sheets so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind raced, but his body felt frozen. The reports, the bank statements, the photos. The overwhelming evidence of Lena's betrayal weighed heavily on him. But it wasn't just the affair that shattered him. It was the realization that everything he had built, everything he had worked for, had been a lie. The betrayal wasn't just about another man. It was the way Lena had manipulated him, played him like a pawn in her game. The lies, the deceit, the money. Sam couldn't stop thinking about how she had systematically stripped him of trust, respect, and now his very sense of self. The emotional toll was too much. He thought he could handle it. But now, with all the pieces of the puzzle laid out before him, Sam couldn't breathe. His chest felt heavy, constricted. It was like drowning in a sea of his own thoughts. He heard the sound of Lena's heels clicking on the floor as she entered the room. Sam didn't look up. He couldn't. Not yet. The anger that had been simmering inside him now felt like a wildfire. But it wasn't just anger. It was a raw, aching pain that threatened to consume him. Lena stood by the doorway for a moment, her hands clasped in front of her, waiting. She had no words. She couldn't even meet his eyes. Sam could feel her guilt hanging in the air, but it wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough. "I don't know how to fix this, Sam," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Fix this?" Sam's heart broke even more at the sound of her voice. Fix this? How could they fix something that had been broken for so long, something built on lies and deceit? "Don't," Sam said, his voice hoarse, barely able to keep it together. "Don't even try. You've already destroyed everything." Lena's face crumpled as she stepped forward, reaching out to touch him, but Sam pulled back instinctively. He couldn't let her touch him. Not now, not after everything. "I never meant to hurt you," Lena whispered, her voice shaking. "I was just lost. I thought I needed someone else to fill the emptiness I felt. I wasn't thinking, Sam. I wasn't thinking about you." Sam's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to scream at her. "You weren't thinking about me? You weren't thinking at all." But the words stuck, lodged in his throat like shards of glass. Instead, he stood up slowly, feeling the weight of his own body like it didn't belong to him anymore. "You think this is about what you need?" Sam's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what I've been going through? All this time I've been working to support us, to support you, and all the while you were tearing it all down behind my back." Lena took a step closer, but Sam stepped back, his hand raised. He couldn't take any more of her empty apologies. The trust he had once had for her was gone, replaced by a cold void. "I thought we were a team," Sam continued, his voice shaking, "but I guess I was just a fool. A fool to believe that you cared about anything but yourself. Do you think I can just forget about this? Forget about him?" Lena's eyes filled with tears, and Sam saw the flicker of guilt and regret in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "Please, Sam," Lena said, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Sam shook his head. "Sorry? You don't get to just say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. You've broken something inside me that can never be fixed. You took everything from me, Lena, and now I have to pick up the pieces of a life that doesn't make sense anymore." His heart ached, and the tears welled up in his eyes, but he forced them back. He wouldn't cry, not for her, not for this. "You've ruined me," Sam whispered, as the weight of his words hit him all at once. He was broken, defeated, but somehow still standing, still breathing. He didn't know how. Lena's hand reached out once more, and this time Sam didn't pull away. He looked at her for the first time in days, really looked at her. He wanted to see remorse. He wanted to feel something, but all he felt was emptiness. "I don't know who you are anymore," Sam said, his voice raw. "You're not the woman I married. You're not the person I loved. You've changed." Lena opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She stood there, her hands shaking, unsure of what to say. Sam turned away, his back to her, trying to gather the strength to walk away. "I can't do this anymore, Lena. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not." Lena's breath hitched, and Sam heard her take a step closer, but he didn't turn around. He couldn't. The silence that filled the room was deafening, and in that moment Sam realized that there was no coming back from this, no fixing it, no pretending. This was the end. The moment Sam entered the lawyer's office, he felt the weight of the world settle heavily on his shoulders. The papers, the evidence, the accusations, it all felt surreal. He had always imagined that a divorce would be a painful, drawn-out process, but he never imagined it would feel like this. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a war, and he was standing at the front line, fighting for his life, his future, and everything he had worked for. Brian, his lawyer, greeted him with a somber expression, the file of documents already spread out across the table. "We've got everything we need, Sam," Brian said, his voice low but determined. "But this isn't going to be easy. Lena has a strong team, and they're going to fight dirty." Sam sat down, his fingers curling into tight fists as he looked at the evidence. The proof of Lena's infidelity, the financial fraud, the secret accounts. It was all right there in black and white, but it didn't matter. All of it felt like a distant echo. What mattered was the deep wound that Lena had caused, one that couldn't be healed with any amount of legal victories. "You're sure we have a solid case, right?" Sam asked, his voice cracking. He didn't want to sound weak, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. His world had been shattered, and the idea of facing Lena in a courtroom, especially with the evidence stacked against him, made his stomach churn. "We have more than enough to go after her, Sam," Brian replied, leaning forward. "The hidden assets, the fraudulent transactions, the affair, it's all there. We just need to play it smart. Lena will try to paint herself as the victim, but we have the facts on our side." Sam nodded, though the words didn't comfort him. He had never been the confrontational type. He had always preferred to work things out calmly, rationally. But this wasn't something that could be fixed with a conversation. It was bigger than that, much bigger. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and phone calls. The legal process was dragging him through a storm of emotions. One day it felt like he was gaining ground, and the next, it felt like Lena's lawyers had turned the tables. They came after him with accusations of neglect, financial irresponsibility, and emotional abuse. Every day was a new attack, and Sam wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on. It was the night of the first court appearance that everything hit him. Sam sat in the courtroom, watching as Lena's attorney expertly twisted the facts. He sat quietly, his hands clenched into fists, as the lawyer painted a picture of him as a neglectful husband, one who put his career before his family, who failed to notice his wife's growing unhappiness. It was all a lie, but in that room, it felt like truth. Lena's eyes were cold as she sat across from him. She didn't look at him once during the entire session. She didn't need to. Her lawyer was doing the work for her, playing the victim and casting Sam as the villain. The weight of it all was suffocating. Sam felt like he was drowning, his breath caught in his chest, the air too thick to breathe. Brian had warned him that it would be tough, but Sam wasn't prepared for the emotional toll it took. He had been betrayed in every way possible, by his wife, by the woman he loved, and now by the legal system. Lena had turned their marriage into a battleground, and Sam was losing. He could feel it. He could feel himself unraveling with every passing minute. After the hearing, Brian pulled him aside. "You're holding up well, Sam," he said, "but we need to prepare for the worst. Lena's team is going to do everything they can to break you, to make you doubt yourself. Don't let them." Sam wanted to believe Brian, wanted to believe that he could stand tall through this storm. But every time he thought about the future, about everything he had lost, he felt like he was sinking further into despair. His life had been taken from him piece by piece. The trust he had given Lena, the love he had poured into their marriage, it was all gone, replaced by a bitter emptiness. He was no longer just fighting for his assets. He was fighting for his dignity, for his very sense of self. The person who had walked into this battle was a man who still believed in the possibility of redemption, in the belief that people could change. But the person sitting in that courtroom was someone else, someone broken, someone who didn't know who he was anymore. Lena's team wasn't just fighting for assets. They were fighting to destroy him, to strip him of everything, even the small piece of humanity he had left. Sam was beginning to realize that he was not just fighting for his life back, he was fighting to survive. And it wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about holding on to whatever shred of himself he had left. The deeper Sam dug into Lena's betrayal, the darker it became. What started as a painful discovery of her affair had quickly spiraled into something much worse. It wasn't just about her infidelity anymore. It was the way she had carefully, methodically torn apart everything they had built together. And now he was seeing the full scale of her deception. The first shock came when Sam reviewed the new financial documents provided by his lawyer. Lena's manipulations had gone far beyond their joint bank accounts. She had set up multiple hidden accounts, moving large sums of money into investments that Sam knew nothing about. But what really made Sam's blood run cold was the discovery of the financial ties between Lena and Marcus. They hadn't just been lovers. They had been partners in a scheme. Sam's pulse quickened as he read through the documents, detailing investments and joint purchases made by Marcus and Lena. A real estate deal, offshore accounts. Marcus had been involved in all of it, using Sam's financial name as a cover. But there was more, much more. Sam's mind raced as he connected the dots. This wasn't just a matter of a cheating wife. Lena and Marcus had planned this. They had been plotting for months, maybe even longer. Every time Sam thought he had seen the worst of it, a new layer of betrayal would surface. "How did I not see this?" Sam whispered aloud, pacing his living room. His stomach twisted in knots as the weight of the conspiracy pressed down on him. They had been playing him for a fool all along. Lena, Marcus, even the way she'd acted, everything had been part of the plan. The more Sam learned, the more hopeless he felt. He had been blindsided, not just emotionally, but financially as well. His entire life had been built on lies, and now the pieces were falling apart around him. He couldn't let them get away with this. He couldn't let Lena and Marcus destroy everything he had worked for. But how could he fight against something so deeply rooted? He wasn't a criminal. He was just a man trying to make a living, trying to hold on to the life he had worked so hard to build. Sam spent the next few days researching every piece of information he could find, combing through every document. He had to find a way to counter their strategy, to expose the full extent of their deception. He couldn't go to the authorities yet, not without solid proof. But every document he uncovered pointed to something even darker. Late one night, after hours of poring over legal documents, Sam finally found something that made him pause. There, buried deep within the paperwork, was a mention of a joint venture between Marcus and a company Lena had been working with. The company was involved in shady business dealings, deals that were not only illegal but dangerous. Sam's heart raced as he read further. This wasn't just about a cheating spouse. This was about a criminal enterprise, and Lena had been deeply involved in it. She had been using Sam's name to launder money, funneling it through the businesses Marcus had connections with. His thoughts swirled with anger and confusion. He had trusted her. He had given her everything. And this was how she repaid him. He couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not Lena, not Marcus. The next day, Sam met with his lawyer again. Brian was already looking through the new evidence, his face grim. "Sam, this is serious," he said, his tone low. "We're dealing with something much bigger than a divorce here. This isn't just infidelity. Lena and Marcus are involved in something illegal. If we don't act fast, you could lose everything." Sam nodded, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. He had never felt more alone. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let them win. He wasn't going to let Lena destroy him, not this time. "I'll do whatever it takes," Sam said, his voice steady. "I need to expose them. I need to make sure they don't get away with this." Brian looked at Sam, his expression sympathetic but resolute. "We're in this together, Sam. We'll fight back, but we need to be smart. Lena's already set up so many safeguards, we have to move carefully." As Sam left the lawyer's office, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the battle ahead. The war was just beginning, and he knew he had to be ready. He had no choice but to confront the conspiracy head-on. Lena and Marcus had underestimated him. They had thought they could destroy him without consequences. But Sam was done being a victim. Sam had been prepared for betrayal. He had been prepared for Lena's affair, her lies, her manipulation, but he wasn't prepared for what he discovered next. It came to light like a slow-burning fire, a revelation that threatened to undo every semblance of peace he had tried to cling to. As Sam pored over the growing stack of documents, something caught his eye, something buried deep within the financial reports and contracts. There it was, a set of documents outlining Lena's involvement in not just illegal activities but something even darker, something that involved Marcus and another more dangerous player in their conspiracy. The realization hit Sam like a punch to the gut. The affair, the financial fraud, they were just the surface. The deeper betrayal was what Marcus had been using Lena for all along. She hadn't just been part of a plan to steal from him. She had been recruited into a far more intricate and illegal operation. They weren't just laundering money, they were involved in criminal enterprises that went far beyond anything Sam had ever imagined. Lena had become a pawn in Marcus's game, but it wasn't just about money, it was about power. And Sam had been the unknowing target of their manipulation. Sam's pulse quickened as he ran his fingers over the documents, his eyes scanning the text. The company Lena had been working with wasn't just a startup, it was a front for a criminal syndicate, one that Marcus had been managing from the shadows. Sam's stomach churned as he connected the dots. Every business transaction they had made, every shady investment, each of them had been a calculated move, all leading back to Marcus's influence. But the deepest betrayal came when Sam found a hidden letter addressed to Marcus from Lena. It was a personal letter, the kind of communication that confirmed what he had only begun to suspect, that Lena had been more than just a passive participant. She had been fully complicit, using their marriage as a cover for her involvement in Marcus's operations. In the letter, Lena wrote about their plans, how she had set up Sam's financial accounts to funnel money without his knowledge, how she had helped Marcus launder funds through their legitimate businesses. But there was something even more chilling. Lena wasn't just a pawn in Marcus's game, she was an active partner, someone who had been planning this with him for years. She had been taking Sam's money, his trust, and using it to build her own empire with Marcus. The final blow came when Sam found a confidential contract signed by Lena and Marcus. The deal outlined their plans to take over a real estate venture Sam had been working on, using his name and resources as a front. Sam was nothing more than an accessory to their criminal activities. Sam's heart pounded as the realization settled in. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted, had been deceiving him in ways that went far beyond an affair. She had been using him, manipulating him. She had betrayed him in every way imaginable, emotionally, financially, and now, it seemed, legally. The anger surged through Sam, but it wasn't just anger. It was the raw, searing feeling of being betrayed in the most intimate way possible. His entire life had been turned upside down by someone he had loved, someone he thought he knew. Lena's actions had gone far beyond infidelity. They had crossed into something darker, something far more dangerous. He couldn't let this go. He couldn't just let her walk away with everything. Sam was done being the victim, done being manipulated. But the deeper he went into this world of lies, the more dangerous it became. He wasn't just fighting to get his life back. He was fighting to protect everything he had worked for from a conspiracy that ran deeper than he ever could have imagined. Sam needed answers, and he needed them fast. The truth had come crashing down on him, and there was no turning back. The web of deceit that Lena and Marcus had spun around him was too intricate to untangle alone. But Sam wasn't about to give up. He couldn't afford to. His life, his future, depended on it. And this time, he would fight back, not just for his heart, but for his very survival. The battle had only just begun. The days that followed were a blur of frantic preparations and mounting pressure. Sam had seen the depths of Lena and Marcus's betrayal, but now, he was ready to show the world what they had done. The investigation was complete, the evidence damning, and with the help of his lawyer, he had prepared to make their conspiracy public. This wasn't just about his divorce anymore. It was about exposing the truth and reclaiming the life that had been stolen from him. The press conference was scheduled. Sam knew the risks. The media was ruthless, and exposing the details of his personal life would bring the kind of attention he'd never wanted. But he had no choice. He couldn't let Lena and Marcus walk away without facing the consequences. As Sam stood in front of the podium, the weight of the decision hit him hard. He wasn't just fighting for his reputation, he was fighting for justice. He felt the eyes of the world on him as the cameras flashed, capturing every moment. His hands shook, but his resolve remained unwavering. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sam began, his voice steady but filled with the emotion he had fought so hard to control, "I stand here today not just as a man who has been betrayed, but as a man who has been lied to, manipulated, and financially destroyed by someone I trusted." The words hung in the air, and Sam could see the journalists scribbling furiously in their notebooks. He took a deep breath, his chest tightening as he continued. "For months I lived in the dark, oblivious to the truth about my own marriage. But what I've learned goes beyond infidelity. Lena, my wife, and her accomplice Marcus have been involved in a series of illegal activities that have directly impacted my life, my finances, and my business. I trusted Lena. I gave her everything, and in return she betrayed me in ways I never imagined." Sam paused, feeling the weight of the truth settling in. He could see the shock in the eyes of the reporters, their faces slowly shifting from curiosity to disbelief. This wasn't just a story about a cheating spouse. This was about corruption, fraud, and deceit that reached further than anyone could have anticipated. "Lena and Marcus have used my name to launder money through various illegal businesses," Sam continued, his voice gaining strength. "They've used me as a pawn in a scheme to rob me of everything I've worked for. I've been exposed to legal and financial ruin because of their actions. I'm here to make sure that no one else is hurt by their lies. No one else falls victim to their manipulations." The cameras snapped even more rapidly as the story unfolded before them. This was the kind of revelation that sent shockwaves through the media, the kind of story that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. Sam knew the ramifications. The fallout would be immense, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He had nothing left to lose. "Lena, if you're listening, I want you to know this isn't just about what you've done to me. This is about the damage you've done to everything we once had. You've taken my trust, my love, and you've twisted it into something unrecognizable. And Marcus, you've used her to destroy everything I worked for. I won't let you walk away without facing the consequences." As Sam finished speaking, he stepped back from the podium, his heart racing. The weight of the confession, the weight of exposing everything, was finally lifting from his shoulders. The reporters erupted into questions, each one coming faster than Sam could answer. The glare of the cameras, the intense pressure, it was all consuming, but Sam didn't flinch. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the days that followed, the media frenzy intensified. Headlines screamed about the financial fraud, the affair, and the criminal activities Lena and Marcus had been involved in. Sam's name was splashed across every news outlet, but this time it wasn't just about his personal life. It was about justice. The story had captivated the public, and Sam became an unwilling symbol of betrayal and resilience. Lena, once so sure of herself, now found herself in a battle she couldn't win. Her reputation was in tatters, her financial empire crumbling as the authorities investigated her connections to Marcus's criminal dealings. The truth had shattered her carefully constructed world, and there was no way to undo the damage. Sam, on the other hand, was beginning to rebuild his life. The weight of the secret was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of strength. He had exposed the truth, and in doing so he had taken back control of his life. The battle wasn't over, not yet. But Sam knew that the hardest part was behind him, and as the days passed, he realized that no matter what came next, he had survived the worst. The courtroom felt suffocating as Sam sat at the defendant's table, staring at Lena's lawyer across from him. The battle had dragged on for weeks, each day adding another layer of pain, another bruise to his already battered soul. But today, everything was coming to a head. The final round, the last chance for Sam to reclaim what was rightfully his. Lena sat behind her lawyer, her eyes cold and distant. She had no remorse. Not even a hint of regret. She had spent the last few weeks spinning her version of the story, painting herself as the victim, the poor wife who had been neglected and led astray. But Sam knew the truth, and now it was his turn to make the world see it too. Brian, Sam's lawyer, leaned over and whispered in his ear, "This is it. We've got the evidence, Sam. You just need to stay calm. Don't let them bait you." Sam nodded, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. He had been through so much already, but today felt different. This wasn't just a divorce hearing. This was a battle for his life, for his dignity, for his future. If he could just stay composed, if he could just hold it together one more time, he would finally be able to put this chapter behind him. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Everyone stood as the gavel slammed down, signaling the start of the proceedings. Sam's heart pounded in his chest as the case continued. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every word, every statement seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Lena's lawyer was the first to speak, presenting a well-rehearsed narrative of their marriage's failure. She painted Sam as an absentee husband, consumed by work, emotionally unavailable. But Sam had been prepared for this. The lawyer's words were nothing more than smoke and mirrors designed to distract from the true story. When it was Sam's turn, his voice shook as he stood to speak. He had been quiet for most of the trial, letting his lawyer do the talking. But now he couldn't stay silent anymore. "Your Honor," Sam began, his voice steady despite the chaos inside his head. "I am not here to play the victim. I am here to expose the truth. I am here because my wife has taken everything from me, my trust, my love, my family. But she didn't stop there. She took my future, my livelihood, and used my name for her own gain." The room was still, all eyes on Sam as he continued. "For months I lived in the dark, oblivious to what was happening, but the truth always comes to light. Lena wasn't just unfaithful, she was involved in a scheme that I never saw coming. She used me, my name, my finances, to fund her and Marcus's criminal activities. She betrayed me in every way possible." Sam's words hit like a punch to the gut. He could see the shock on Lena's face, the disbelief, but there was no remorse. There was only the cold calculation of a woman who had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to admit her wrongdoings. Not here, not now. "Lena has been manipulating me, emotionally and financially, for years," Sam continued, his voice gaining strength. "And it's not just about the affair. It's about the lies she's been living, the money she's been stealing from me, the plans she made to destroy everything we had. She and Marcus have been working together to strip me of everything I've ever worked for." Lena's lawyer jumped to his feet, trying to interrupt, but Sam was relentless. The truth had to be heard. "Lena took advantage of my trust, my love, and my generosity," Sam said, looking directly at her. "But what's worse is that she used me as a pawn in a scheme that I had no idea about. She used our marriage, our life, to fuel her own ambitions, and I was too blind to see it." The courtroom was in stunned silence. Sam's words echoed in the room, reverberating through the hearts of those who had gathered to hear the truth. The gravity of the situation was sinking in. This wasn't just a messy divorce. This was a web of lies and deceit that reached far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The judge turned to Lena, his gaze hardening. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Mrs. Bennett?" Lena's eyes flickered, but she didn't speak. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. She had no defense. There was nothing she could say to undo the damage, to erase the truth that Sam had just revealed. Brian stepped forward and delivered his final statement, outlining the evidence of Lena's financial fraud and the illegal activities she had been involved in. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, and Sam could feel the weight of it all lifting. It wasn't just about winning, it was about bringing the truth to light. And for the first time in months, Sam felt like he was finally in control again. When the judge finally rendered his verdict, Sam's heart pounded in his chest. He had won. Lena was ordered to return the stolen assets. Her business dealings were under investigation, and her reputation, everything she had worked for, was destroyed. The court ruled in Sam's favor, and Lena would be held accountable for her actions. Sam stood tall as the gavel slammed down. The battle had been long, and the scars would remain, but he had fought for his truth, for his future. And in that moment, Sam knew that no matter what came next, he had reclaimed his life. The aftermath of the trial settled over Sam like a heavy fog. The courtroom battle had been fierce, and the truth had been revealed, but the victory felt hollow. Yes, Lena had been held accountable. Yes, the assets she had stolen from him were returned, and Marcus's criminal activities were now under investigation. But none of that changed the deep emptiness Sam felt inside. He had fought for justice, but at what cost? The headlines in the papers were relentless. wife of prominent entrepreneur involved in major fraud scheme. The media buzzed with every detail of the case, and Sam was dragged through it all. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that his life had been splashed across the news or the reminder of everything he had lost. His trust, his love, his marriage, gone. Lena had been silent since the verdict, her face now permanently etched in the court records. There was no apology, no attempt to make amends. She had moved on, just as she always had, as though the destruction she left in her wake didn't matter. Sam sat in his apartment one night staring at the empty walls. His home, once filled with the warmth of shared memories, felt like a shell now. He was still reeling from the destruction of his personal life. The love he thought would last forever had been torn apart by deceit and betrayal. Every corner of the apartment was a reminder of what had once been. The pictures on the walls, the books on the shelves, the spaces they had shared together. Everything seemed to echo with the absence of Lena. His lawyer, Brian, had called earlier that day to inform him that the investigation into Marcus's activities was moving forward. But Sam could barely focus on the news. It didn't matter anymore. The damage had already been done. The scars from the betrayal, from the way his life had unraveled, were deeper than any legal victory could heal. The phone on the table buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his sister, Sophie. "Hey, how are you holding up?" the text read. Sam stared at it for a moment, hesitating. He didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to burden anyone with his pain. But he knew Sophie was only trying to help. After everything that had happened, she was one of the few people who still stood by him. He tapped out a quick response. "I'm fine, just trying to figure out what comes next." He put the phone down and looked around again, his mind swirling with the endless questions of how his life had come to this. Was there any hope left for him? Could he ever trust again? Would he ever truly heal from the wounds Lena had inflicted? He thought about the quiet moments, the times when Lena had smiled at him, the life they had built together. Those memories felt so distant now, like something out of a dream he no longer recognized. The ache in his chest, the raw hurt, had become an almost constant companion. And even though he had won, even though the world had seen the truth, the victory felt like ashes in his mouth. Later that evening, Sam found himself staring at the papers Lena had signed during the trial. Documents that detailed her deceit, her manipulation, her theft. There was a sense of finality to them, but the weight of her betrayal still felt fresh, raw. She had planned it all, the lies, the betrayal, the secrets, and in the end she had gotten away with everything, while he had lost everything. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. Sam's heart skipped a beat, expecting it to be someone from the media or worse, Lena showing up unannounced. He opened the door, half prepared for the worst. Instead, it was Sophie, standing there with a concerned look on her face. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Sam stepped aside, allowing her to enter. He didn't have the energy for small talk anymore. There was no point in pretending everything was fine. Sophie sat on the couch, her eyes studying him carefully. "I know this has been hard," she began, her voice gentle. "But you're stronger than this. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you will get through this. You're not alone." Sam didn't respond immediately. He just sat there, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wanted to believe her, wanted to feel that glimmer of hope that she was offering, but it was hard. Every day felt like a battle. "I don't even know who I am anymore," Sam said, his voice cracking. "Everything's been turned upside down. I trusted her, I loved her, and now all I have is this emptiness." Sophie reached over, taking his hand in hers. "You are still you, Sam. You're just rediscovering who you are, and I'm here for you. We all are." Her words, simple and steady, broke through the fog in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for healing. Maybe the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be his road, and he could choose where it led. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sam allowed himself to believe that things could get better, that despite the bitter aftermath of the betrayal, there was still a future ahead. Sam hadn't expected to feel this way. Empty, yet somehow free. The days after the trial had been filled with constant reflection, the hum of his mind never ceasing. The truth had come out. Lena's betrayal had been laid bare for the world to see, and Marcus's role in it all was now a matter of public record. But Sam was still left to pick up the pieces of the life he had once believed in. Healing wasn't linear. There were good days and bad, but the bad ones were becoming fewer. The more Sam embraced the truth, the more he realized that there was no way to change the past, but there was a way to move forward. He had spent so much of his life depending on others, on Lena, on his career, on the security that they had created together. But in the end, it had all been a lie. Now, for the first time in a long time, Sam was learning what it meant to stand alone. The quiet mornings had become his sanctuary. He would wake up, his body feeling heavier than it used to, as if it had been weighed down by the years of emotional turmoil. But as the days stretched on, he began to feel the tightness in his chest loosen. The sorrow that had engulfed him in the days following the trial was still there, but it wasn't as suffocating. Sam started taking walks around the city, letting the cool air fill his lungs. He found solace in the simple act of moving through the world, of being present in a way he hadn't been for years. As the weeks passed, he began to reconnect with the people who had been there for him all along. His friends, his family, the ones who had stuck by him even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Sophie had been his rock, the one who had reminded him that he wasn't alone in this. She had been there through the worst of it, and now she was seeing him rise from the ashes. But it wasn't just about being surrounded by loved ones. Sam had to find his own strength again. He began working with a therapist, someone he could talk to without the fear of judgment. It was in those sessions that he began to confront the deeper wounds he had been carrying for so long. Trust had been a major casualty of his marriage, and rebuilding it wasn't going to happen overnight. But Sam realized that healing was about more than just moving on. It was about learning to trust again, starting with himself. In the quiet moments of introspection, Sam began to understand that redemption wasn't about punishing Lena or seeking revenge. It was about forgiving himself for allowing himself to be deceived, for letting his life become entangled in the lies that Lena had spun. He had been a victim, yes, but he was also complicit in allowing the facade to persist for as long as it did. The healing, he realized, had to begin with self-forgiveness. One day, Sam sat down and started writing. He didn't know why, but he felt the need to put his thoughts on paper. What started as a cathartic exercise turned into something more. It was a letter to himself, a letter acknowledging the pain, the betrayal, the confusion, but also a letter to the man he was becoming, a man who was no longer defined by his past mistakes or his broken marriage, a man who was ready to embrace the future. The first draft wasn't perfect. It was raw and unrefined, filled with the emotions he had kept bottled up for so long. But it felt like progress. It felt like he was finally making peace with the past. As the days passed, Sam found that he could look back without the weight of resentment or anger holding him down. As he slowly rebuilt his life, Sam realized that he was no longer the man who had walked into that courtroom months ago. He was stronger now, more resilient. And while the scars from the betrayal would always be a part of him, they didn't define him. He had come through the storm and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Sam knew one thing for sure. He wasn't afraid anymore. Sam stood in front of the mirror, his reflection unfamiliar yet full of potential. He had come a long way from the man he had been just a year ago, the man who had been deceived, crushed under the weight of betrayal. Now, as he looked at himself, he saw something different. He saw a man who had survived, a man who was rebuilding. The scars were still there, faint and tender, but they no longer defined him. He had spent months struggling, fighting for justice, and finding a way through the wreckage that Lena had left behind. But now, with the worst behind him, Sam felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. A new beginning wasn't just something to look forward to. It was something he was already living. It wasn't perfect. Healing was never a straight path, and there were days when the weight of the past would creep back into his mind, threatening to pull him under. But Sam had learned how to deal with it. He had learned to live in the moment, to embrace his own strength, and to see the beauty in starting over. His first steps toward a new beginning were small but deliberate. He started taking care of himself, physically, emotionally, and mentally. He returned to the gym, something he had neglected during the months of turmoil. It was more than just working out. It was a way to reclaim control over his body, to feel strong again. He also took time to rebuild his social life. The people who had stood by him, especially his sister Sophie, became more than just a source of support. They became a reminder that he wasn't alone. There was love and friendship out there for him, and Sam began to understand that the relationships he still had were worth holding on to. But it wasn't just about returning to normal. It was about creating something new. Sam had always been a man who lived for his career, for the goals he had set. Now, with a new perspective, he found himself exploring passions he had never given enough time to. He started to write, channeling his experiences into something tangible. Words that had once felt too painful to say were now flowing freely, a cathartic release. One afternoon, Sam found himself sitting at his favorite cafe, his laptop open in front of him. The sun was setting outside, casting a warm glow over the world. He took a deep breath, watching the people around him, enjoying the simple pleasures of life that had once seemed so far out of reach. He typed a few words on the screen, then paused. The letter he had written to himself all those months ago was still there, saved in a file. He hadn't looked at it in weeks. Slowly, he opened the file and read through the words he had written during his darkest moments. His heart clenched as he read the raw emotion, the pain, the uncertainty. But as he finished reading, he realized something important. He had survived that. He was no longer that man. Sam closed the laptop, a small but genuine smile playing on his lips. He wasn't the same person who had stood in the courtroom, trembling with anger and sorrow. He had emerged from that chaos stronger, wiser, and more aware of what truly mattered. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, Sam felt like he was walking it with purpose. The shadows of the past no longer loomed over him. The betrayal, the heartbreak, and the pain were all part of the story, but they didn't define the ending. His phone buzzed, breaking his moment of peace. It was Sophie, as usual, checking in. Sam smiled and typed back a quick message. "I'm good, really good. I think I'm finally ready for what comes next." A few minutes later, Sophie replied with a simple message. "I'm proud of you." Sam stared at the message for a moment, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't afraid of it anymore. He had taken the first steps toward healing, toward redemption, and in that moment, Sam knew that no matter what, he would be okay. This was his new beginning. Sam stood in front of the apartment that once felt like home. The place where laughter had echoed, where memories had been made, and where he had shared his life with Lena. But now it was just a building. A shell of what it had been, a reminder of everything he had lost. He hadn't seen Lena in weeks. After the trial, after everything had come to light, she had disappeared from his life as suddenly as she had entered it. No apologies, no attempts at redemption. She had simply walked away, leaving him to pick up the shattered pieces of his world. Sam didn't know why he was here, standing in front of the door, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Maybe it was for closure. Maybe it was to finally say the words he had been holding in for so long. The anger, the betrayal, the hurt, it had all festered inside him for months. But now he felt numb. It was as if the storm inside him had finally passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The place was empty, just like it had been when Lena first left. The silence felt like a weight on his chest, suffocating him. There was no sound of laughter, no flicker of light from the kitchen, no hint of the life they had once shared. Just emptiness. It had been her choice to leave, but it had still felt like a betrayal, like he had been abandoned. Sam moved through the room slowly, his fingers trailing over the furniture, the walls, the remnants of a life that had once been filled with love. Every corner held a memory. The smell of her perfume, the way she used to leave her shoes by the door, the way they would sit together on the couch, talking about everything and nothing. He remembered the moments when he thought their life together was perfect, when he couldn't imagine anything tearing them apart. But now it all seemed so distant, so foreign. He stopped in the living room where they had spent countless hours together. The photo on the wall caught his eye. It was from their honeymoon, a picture of them standing on the beach laughing, a time when everything had seemed possible, when love had been all that mattered. But now, looking at it, Sam felt only sadness. Lena had destroyed everything, not just their marriage, but their entire life together. She had taken his trust, his love, and turned it into something unrecognizable. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with his heart, was no longer the person standing in front of him. Sam exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of it all. This wasn't just about the affair, or the money, or the lies. This was about the destruction of something beautiful, something real. But as he stood there, surrounded by memories, he realized that he couldn't hold on to them anymore. It was time to let go. He took one last look around the apartment, at the remnants of his past, and knew that he had to leave it behind. He couldn't keep living in the shadow of what he had lost. The healing process wasn't just about rebuilding his life. It was about moving forward, about creating a future that didn't revolve around the past. As Sam turned to leave, a text message appeared on his phone. It was from Sophie. "Are you okay?" she asked. He stared at the message for a moment, his thumb hovering over the keys. He thought about how far he had come, about the battles he had fought, about the person he was becoming. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. "I'm okay," he typed back. "Better than okay. I'm ready to move forward." With that, Sam stepped out of the apartment for the last time. The door clicked shut behind him, and he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't over. It would never be over. But he was done with the past. He was done with Lena, with the lies, with the pain. The future was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, Sam was ready to embrace it.